Well, Mal, very good to meet you. Thank you very much for agreeing to take part in the roundtable. I want to start by asking you about the fact that you come from Iraq originally. What brought an Iraqi boy to Liverpool in the first place?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Actually wasn't by choice. I was quite young, and actually my parents fled the country after the first Gulf War. My father's dream was actually to go to America. He grew up with 50s America kind of radio, etc. But we settled on the UK. We were, kindly accepted as asylum seekers in the UK. And really, we lived in South Wales briefly, which was very strange to go from Baghdad, a massive city, to the valleys of South Wales, very green and lush. And then by chance, we visited Liverpool, a city that was kind of on the up, a city that my parents were aware of because the Beatles and the football club, and they decided to settle there along with myself and my sister. So I did my schooling all the way to university, all the way to a master's level in Liverpool. So I spent a good part of time there. And I did my father ran a business, a sweet shop. So I kind of explored my interest in terms of technology and arts through my education, but also had kind of fundamental business upbringing through the business that my dad ran as well.
And is that where you said you did had university studies there, and that's where you first started looking at technology in that sense and creativity together? Is that fair?
Yeah, that was kind of when I started exploring those two things colliding in a sense. I was also the kind of the tech guy in the family, or I was into computers generally, and I didn't really realize for a long time that the comics, the animations, the games that I played, that I enjoyed as a form of entertainment and escapism, were things that I could actually create using technology. And so through my studies, I kind of finally made those things collide and understood that those things could work together. And I abandoned a career strictly in programming to pursue more of a kind of creative technology practice by doing a kind of additionally to my degree, doing a master's in animation, which helped me to kind of refine those things together, both tech and the art side of things. And at the time, that was when kind of the previous economic crash happened. And so the jobs market was quite challenging. And I ended up doing a placement that helped me to kind of work with the BBC, a games company, and a web company. And again, that really broadened my horizons. And ultimately, I was actually fortunate enough to be invited to a competition, a graduate competition, to join a team in Dundee doing a program called Dare to be Digital. Again, kind of post-university competition. And that brought me to Dundee as a city, which I was aware of, but didn't really know. So that was kind of my starting professional journey in Scotland.
And Dare to be Digital is something which has been a real magnet as far as bringing talent to the city of Dundee as well, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. The University of Aberdeen kind of started the program, and Aberdeen's university I think, is the first to kind of offer computer games courses. And again, building on the heritage of games making in Dundee that goes back to the Lemmings and Grand Theft Auto many decades ago now. And so that competition, which was post university, encourage collaboration. It was paid. You got paid, a tiny amount of money, but to kind of just get your food and stuff, and accommodation was provided. But in that kind of short spell of time, I got a taste of the city. I got to appreciate the fact that industry was fairly well connected with academia. It was fairly integrated into the kind of broader creative side of the city. And there were opportunities here. So actually, after that competition, I came back to stay to kind of, I got employed as various kind of junior positions, and that started my career in games and technology.
Do you think that the history of Dundee as being a centre, for example, in terms of comics, when the publishing industry was so strong in that particular area, is that something which has helped Dundee to make the shift across in terms of working in the context of animation and the like?
I would say so, and I think even if you go back, pre-comics, or even just because of journalism in general,
Yeah.
the kind of DC Thompson family tree, that kind of line of journalism, magazines, comics. I think there's a clear appreciation for the arts, and arts and creative people, and bringing that together with business and large audiences, be it local, national, and international. So, and it's quite a small city, and because obviously there's the jute industry, there's a bit of an international connection there. So I think all these threads have kind of built together to kind of form something bigger. And really, the kind of the game story in Dundee is classically the Timex factory closing, things like that happening, and people doing off their own backs, making games and starting studios like DMA Design that kind of led to the historic game projects like Lemmings and Grand Theft Auto. And what's happened since is there's been kind of a steady ecosystem of games that has existed here. It's probably influenced the rest of Scotland and the rest of the UK over time.
I mean, yeah, I think that's entirely true. I think that there's a huge influence in the UK. People talk about London, but in actual fact, in terms of gaming, Dundee's an incredibly important centre. But it's also a very interesting sector because it's not necessarily a sector that needs to be in a major city. So, you find that there are important games companies in all sorts of strange places that you wouldn't necessarily expect to be a centre of gaming historically.
Yeah, absolutely. I think because gaming as a sector is it can be boom bust. It can be like, multiple startups, people going again, because it's a hit driven industry. So
Yeah.
what happens is if sometimes they hit, people make, a decent amount of money, they invest it back, hopefully. If they don't, they tend to be able to start up another company fairly soon afterwards. So I think they've realized they don't have to be in London. They can be in kind of smaller places. And it's to the benefit of those smaller places. However, there's still a challenge within the game sector of the kind of classic silo mentality where you can be a bit closed-minded and kind of focused on your work with what's happening around you. And I think you can probably do that better in a bigger city where you can get lost in so many different silos. Whereas in a place like Dundee, silos do exist, where there's just it's a smaller community, so people kind of tend to know each other a bit more. So I've seen a lot more collaboration happen within games and the broader creative sector in Dundee than I've seen anywhere else.
Um, how important do you think those international connections are in terms of building the game sector, or indeed the broader digital technology sector in that way, the creative technical sector in that way?
Well, I think the reality is, especially with games, the market isn't Scotland, it's not the UK, it's worldwide, right? So the reality is we're serving an international audience. So whether we like it or not, we have to respond to that, right?
Of
And
course.
also likewise, cost wise, making game, any kind of tech-based work is very pricey, is very expensive. And so naturally, sometimes the funding scope available locally doesn't match the ambition, So sometimes you have to go out with. So in terms of your audience is international, and sometimes the investment is international too. So naturally, it's kind of connected to a worldwide kind of global marketplace.
Now, I wanted to talk to you, if that's okay, about the types of businesses you set up, because you have been a director of a number of companies, as I understand it. So I think that there's Neon, which you were a director of, but also then, of course, more recently you've been the founder and director of the Biome Collective. Can you just talk about the sorts of businesses you sought to create, and some of the issues that have arisen as you've done that?
Absolutely. So probably the first business I kind of started was after a few years working in Dundee. A few friends kind of cobbled together a bit of funding. We managed to acquire some funding, and we started a studio, which is a very traditional startup. We got a government grant. We had to employ people, which we did, and it was very much 25K. There were six of us, and we had to make it somehow work. And we did. We ended up that business called Quarter Kilometer. It was established in Dundee. We got work for hire fairly quickly, thankfully. So we were able to kind of generate income into the company fairly quickly. And we ran that studio for about 4 years, and that was kind of my first attempt in this kind of realm. What was interesting then was that really kind of made me appreciate maybe there's different types of business structures that can exist. It doesn't have to just be a startup kind of focused on solely on economic growth. Because obviously that time that was the case, especially because of the funding we were acquiring. We were engaged with Scottish Enterprise, which was kind of encouraging us to, reach turnover of doubling our turnover to, multi-million within, 3 years, etc. So that kind of came with a particular type of pressure. Being a creative person, of course, I have these ambitious ideas that take that kind of level of scale, but also I want to just do interesting, meaningful work. So that was kind of a bit of a challenge for me. So after that we folded that company primarily because it was quite a strain on us in terms of mental health, because it was all new to us. Thankfully, we're friends now. At the time, we were not friends at the time, the end of the company. But as a result of that, and I got a taste of Dundee in terms of with the game sector, the broader sector, in terms of the council, other creative institutions, charities, etc. And so I came to appreciate that kind of broader spectrum of people, funding opportunities, and direction in terms of, well, we don't just have to do economic growth here. What about social and cultural? What about those things? And so as a result of that, I ended up joining Neon Digital Arts Festival, which is a festival set up by quite a talented team in the city. They've been running for about 10 years. I joined that, and we kind of set it up as a charity. We helped the organization set up to be a kind of a regular funded organization from Creative Scotland. And that was a good experience for me, kind of really not hands-on, kind of from the kind of trustee kind of position, so fairly distanced, but able to kind of steer strategy and guide it. And as a result of that kind of experience and other roles that I did at the time, both primarily voluntary kind of director positions, I then set up Biome Collective, which is an organization I'm still part of today. And that was very much us thinking, actually, we want to make games. We're interested in this kind of tech-based art world, but we want to do it differently. We want to be more flexible, and we want to encourage collaboration. So we approached it in a kind of different model. So essentially, Biome Collective is an umbrella organization for currently up to 25 contractors, freelancers. And what we do is we use it as an umbrella to kind of get project funding and scale up and down as needed, as required. So we've been running that organization since 2015, incorporated in 2016. And it's been very much kind of organically grown. We've hardly ever advertised. People kind of come to us and said, because I've always identified that there's a bit of a spillover in games because of that kind of boom bust nature of the industry. But also with that, there is, broadly speaking, there's a massive interest in games and technology, and people want an in. They want to understand it. They want to learn about it. They want to collaborate. So Biome Collective has helped us kind of take advantage of that spill, people wanting a bit of a break from the industry to do things more independently, but at the same time, people out with the sector wanting to collaborate. So we've created an organization that allows us to do all those things. And it's, it's not perfect, it's challenging, it's kind of, there are still pressures that we have, like any business does, of making sure we, kind of generate enough revenue for the individuals involved. But by setting up not as a traditional startup, it's meant that we've not had to grow the company. We've actually grown, more money's been generated year to year, but it's been a kind of a slow, gradual increase, and it hasn't had to skyrocket, by year 3, turning over millions, etc. And what's that done to us is that it's allowed us as a kind of almost like a platform to engage in conversation with both national and international organizations, be it from traditional media, with film, games, etc., but also arts and cultural organizations, because they see us as a kind of an interesting oddity that they can speak to, which we are. We are a bit strange, we are a bit odd, but it's meant that our creative output has been ranging from games for children on websites, working with the National Museum up in Edinburgh, or doing a BAFTA Scotland nominated Killbox drone game, which is kind of an art installation and video game that's been still touring around the world. It's been to over, I think, 50 countries around the world. So our work has been quite broad, which has been, creatively speaking, very interesting.
And can we just talk about the grants program you have as well? Because I know that Biome Collective offers grants as well, and I assume that's to draw people in that wouldn't necessarily feel that it was a space which they could readily occupy.
Yeah, so as a community, we've tried to kind of grow as a community. So almost like we've always tried to have a membership which is very much kind of diverse. We've tried to be as inclusive as we could be. We haven't always been inclusive. Like, for example, the board for the first, good few years was just a bunch of dudes. We addressed that recently, thankfully. But what happened especially with lockdown, we were based in a co-working space. We actually lost that as part of lockdown, and we became a kind of digital only community. What was interesting is we grew more as a digital only community, because it meant that you didn't have to be in Dundee. We took members from even Glasgow and Edinburgh and elsewhere in Scotland. But as a result of the membership, we kind of realized that because there was a lot of people suffering a lot of hardship, because, for example, the furlough scheme didn't obviously support everyone. A lot of our members are kind of freelancers, kind of quite people on the kind of margins of traditional ways of working and getting paid, essentially. We were clearly aware of the challenges that were being faced by people that were not even able to apply to various hardship schemes that were being made available in Scotland in particular. And so the membership decided to kind of put a bit of money together and specifically to target people who are kind of marginalized. So we set up the Biome Collective grants, and it's we've tried to make it as super, as little friction as possible in terms of someone who is interested in this kind of creative digital practice that we're involved in, who's maybe struggling to kind of get a job or be involved. And so it's a very simple application. Just tell us a bit about yourself, show us some of your work if you want to, but basically just who are you? And we've kind of, there's a committee that is a revolver committee that kind of selects grant recipients. And as part of the program, we've also kind of extended that to be not just money. So obviously grant recipients have been welcome to be members of the collective if they choose to be. We've also offered mentorship. So specific mentorship to the grant winners and beyond. We've kind of selected a number of key people who applied, who we could clearly see, oh, that person is interested in VR. Such and such person over here is a VR person within Biome. Let's get them to have a chat. Just an hour chat, no strings attached. Maybe help that person in their career, for example. So really the grant's been kind of a community initiative, which is really great for me as a founder of the organization, because as a founder, you tend to have to drive a lot of the initiatives. Whereas in this instance, it was completely grassroots initiative. People have kind of self-organized a committee to, do the website, do the copy, all that kind of stuff. And what's been really good for us is it's attracted other people within our network to also contribute to the fund. So we've been able to give more than we could even afford, because our network has been able to kind of contribute to that, which has been, very good, to be honest with you. Yeah.
So you've in a way been able to bring through the network a group of angel investors together as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest with you, it obviously it's very, the scale of it is tiny, but it's very much in terms of our ambition. It meets our ambition of wanting to be a funder ultimately. We've always said that because we are experts in this domain, because we have the network of people, the practitioners, we're actually in a great position to de-risk investment, essentially. So we want to essentially be able to be in a position whereby Biome Collective is able to actually administer a substantial amount of kind of, funding in the future. It's something we're kind of building up to, which I hope we'll be able to kind of achieve.
And by the sounds of it, you're also working in the context of not just trying to find people who've got technical skills, but actually a wider group of people who've got skills which you think can be enhanced through the use of technology, or what they do can be enhanced in that way, and therefore bringing people together in that context. Is that fair?
Oh, absolutely. I think, for us, we appreciate tech or digital as just as a medium like any other, and we appreciate there's a bit of a kind of a learning curve there, but beyond that, it's everyone should be able to kind of explore this. They're not currently, not everyone's able to, but we're trying to kind of help in that process. And yeah, in terms of our membership, we've kind of, the people who are part of Biome Collective, there aren't just game makers. There's researchers. There are people who are just traditional artists or designers who are kind of intrigued by this kind of interactive realm. And so we've tried to really be open to those people in particular, because ultimately, because of that silo mentality that I discussed earlier, that can really kill creativity, quite frankly, because you're surrounded by similar-minded people. You're focused on a very hard challenge. You're making a game, selling it. So there's a good reason to be in a silo, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, in the long term, it's a negative impact on you. And so for us, we're kind of trying to break that by having quite a diverse membership and community who can kind of challenge our assumptions and our behaviors and our creative outputs and aspirations, just because they do things differently, very differently, you know. So it's really, we found it to be very quite a healthy dynamic, really, for us.
It's a great way of challenging your own thinking, isn't it?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
How did that translate when you describe what you were doing in terms of your, I know you were a member of the Scottish Games Developers Association or a trustee there, and then a member of the advisory board for the British Games Initiative. Did people understand what you were trying to do?
Not always, to be honest with you. So I'm kind of we're kind of caught in the middle of different worlds essentially. So even within the game sector, sometimes people don't quite get it, you know, because they're just focused doing their thing,
Yeah.
which is fair enough. But you know, because of that churn in games, you know, a lot of people don't stay in games, unfortunately. You know, it's kind of people do drop off. There are people who are seeking sanctuary or community out with the kind of like make earn money sort of thing. So people do kind of reach out to us, and I think people appreciate what we do, because our initiatives aren't just we make a bunch of stuff. We do a lot of community activity, whether it's outreach in terms of working with the VNA to get young people to make games through pay prototyping, or whether it's engaging with clients and, you know, from international partners, and just trying to like break down the mystery of games and technology, and, you know, seeking out people who want to work with games, saying, actually, do you really want to make a game? You've got, you know, you've got money, but is this a wise investment for you? What do you want to do? You want to engage people, young people in particular. Great, games is good, but games can be very broad. It doesn't have to be a shooty game, whatever it might be. You know, that we try to make it kind of about playful media as opposed to just games, because I think that opens up to more collaborations to more people, essentially. Yeah.
I know you're also a board member at Creative Scotland, and I'm old enough to have been around when Creative Scotland was being discussed and being created. And I remember that, you know, there was a lot of skepticism about whether or not you could bring this diverse space together in terms of creativity, rather than having an arts council and a film council and just bring them together in that way. Do you think the experiment has worked, and do you think it's something which has helped to support the diversity of creativity within Scotland?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I'm not just saying that because I'm kind of part of the organization. No, absolutely. I think prior to joining the organization, um, I was regularly funded by Creative Scotland through various, you know, projects, whether it's Time to Shine program, working with young people, kind of demystifying games, or our art installation Killbox, which was, you know, touring around the world still. So they've always kind of, they've been able to fund experimental game stuff, even though that's kind of out with the norm, shall we say, just because kind of it's new territory. So that's been good for me. But at the same time, there's been lots of projects that they haven't funded that I've tried, you know, I applied for. But since joining the organization, it's been really interesting to see that there's clearly an appetite to kind of understand the kind of more diverse creative practice, like games, like digital. But also it's been good for me to kind of, you know, look under the bonnet and see this kind of well-run organization try to kind of work across a whole diverse range of art disciplines and practice.
And it's complicated.
It's very complicated, and absolutely, clearly there are divisions, there are different particular funding pots and requirements from government, for example. So, for example, Screen Scotland, you know, has a particular focus, and it's able to kind of deliver that outstanding results, really. But also, I think what's been interesting for me is to kind of join the organization, you know, during the pandemic, and
Mhm.
see how they've been able to kind of really respond and deliver emergency funding. So some of the funding levels, you know, if you see this level, there's been a massive spike in terms of the government turning to an organization like Creative Scotland, saying, listen, all these other organizations need support with this venues, etc. Here's a bunch of money. You know, we need to kind of deliver this to the people appropriately, and they've done an amazing job of that. So it's been fascinating for me to see that in action, but also likewise the fact that I've been able to join the organization with my background. I think it's been really interesting for me to see kind of, you know, them trying to add more diverse faces, both in terms of like ethnicity, gender, but also in terms of skill set and expertise. So that's been fascinating for me to kind of witness and see. And also, I guess for me as a freelancer, I'm trying to represent freelancers, because not just games, broadly speaking, there's lots of, there's lots of the little guy, the kind of individual. A lot of creative industry is the individual, is small micro businesses. So it's good to see that kind of at that board level, that voice is able to be present and to kind of challenge or contribute whatever possible.
Yes, because I think as far as agencies are concerned, very often those micro businesses, those sole traders, in actual fact, are the easiest to overlook because they don't really have very much of a voice. But in actual fact, as far as the creative economy is concerned, they are the bedrock of the sector.
Absolutely, and it's being able to support that when you're a massive ship, essentially.
Yeah.
When you're a national organization, you are dealing with the scale of things you're dealing with. It becomes very hard to kind of get to that kind of that macro level, which ultimately is the bedrock, as you said. But there have been lots of interesting initiatives from Creative Scotland, even before I joined, the Inclusion Fund, etc., which has tried to kind of tackle that. There's been a focus on freelancers, actually. Again, before I even joined, there's been kind of this desire. They put a great pack together in terms of freelancers, how to kind of a toolkit for freelancers. It's good to see a national agency be aware of those challenges and try and tackle that on some level. But it's a continued challenge. And certainly for me, what I would love to see is great collaboration from national agencies and local government, essentially. I think that there is some conversation, there are some things happening, but I would like to see more of that, because I just feel like there's just something about a local authority who has contact with local organizations, and they just have that data, the intel that a national agency just does not have in time. They'll have it maybe in after 3-4 years when a big summary's been put together, but sometimes you need to kind of be more agile and respond to things on the fly, and you only get that through local initiatives. And it's interesting about Dundee because it is a small city, so things that kind of operate differently to kind of larger cities, and I would say that they can be much faster, which is great. And it's been really good for me to see the UNESCO team within the city and how they've operated. It's a very small team supported by a local authority, but also the V&A. There's a partnership with the V&A Dundee now, and it's been great to see them as a very small team be able to punch way above their weight in terms of engaging local people, not just in the city center, out with the city center, but also organizations, and be able to kind of establish international relationships and links, which aren't always possible on that level.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that in a way, what you're talking about is also the granularity that you need to have to be able to understand how the sector works at that local level and make sure that the support is there at that local level as well. Because actually, quite often, if you do things just at a national or even a regional level, you lose actually some of the context and some of the support that's really required to see the industry move forward.
Absolutely. And sometimes you've got to grease the wheels, and it takes like small pockets of grants here and there to start conversations. Even just to start a conversation, that has to be paid for.
Yeah.
Someone's got to kind of get the right people to sit down, have that coffee, think about the collaboration. And sometimes it comes down to these small agencies who are able to kind of, they have the budget, but also they have the flexibility to act on the fly, be a bit more responsive to their kind of surroundings. And what I've often seen is those small scale success stories tend to be the ones that when we go back 5-10 years later, they've maybe gone on to kind of achieve bigger, more ambitious success through national agencies. But it's how you start in the first place, because sometimes it's just not appropriate for a national agency to kind of deliver those small scale things. It's just not possible. There isn't the bandwidth for that, and that bandwidth is available on a kind of local authority level. I just think that we need to challenge local authorities. It's actually, you need more creative people, more creative practitioners to be management, quite frankly, because they need to be around the table where decisions are being made about where funding is going and how it should be targeted. And clearly the creative industry has so much to offer other sectors. And we're all certainly trying to kind of bridge those gaps and communicate that. And I just feel there's so much more growth and development there that we all can kind of build towards and foster. When it comes to, say, health, tourism, whatever it might be, whatever the sectors that are out there, creativity can bring something to it, because that silo mentality of games is true for every sector, right? You're
Absolutely.
working in health, you focus on that, you're not able to kind of maybe bring people who can express themselves creatively, kind of really problem solvers. When you're an artist, you're a designer, you're a problem solver, right? And I think we just need to see more creative problem solvers who are in administration, in finance, in different kind of sectors, just to kind of get things done quicker, quite frankly, and to achieve better results.
Yeah, it's to my mind, it's always been that notion of you want to have Lear's fall. That's in many ways what the creative sector does in quite staid organizations. It asks difficult questions that nobody else, which may seem very foolish, but
Yeah.
people make assumptions about the fact that things work in a particular way. And in actual fact, sometimes those things really do need to be challenged.
Absolutely, absolutely. Without that, what we're doing, we need to challenge who we are, what we're doing, because that's what leads to growth, right? And that genuine growth, not just economic, social, cultural, individual, whatever it might be. You need to have that whole picture. You can't just focus on one aspect of growth. You need to kind of develop all things at the same time in tangents. Things will kind of, bubble away at a different pace, but you've got to take care of everything, right?
Yeah, quite.
Yeah, it's really essential.
But that does then lead me on to my final question, and that is about the blockchain, about crypto, and about NFTs. Where do you stand on that? Is this something which is fool's gold, or is this something which is actually about the future, or is it somewhere in between the two?
I think it's somewhere in between the two. I think I certainly I'm an advocate of new technology. Always, I'm always intrigued. I'm puzzled. I question things. I want to explore things. What I don't like to see is people kind of the frothing at the mouth that, oh, this is the next best thing, or this is the worst thing possible. And you could argue both things, and both things are true in the right context. So I'm a bit cautious, but I'm also an optimist, and I'm kind of keen to see where some of these technologies go and develop. And I think the only way that we're able to kind of develop these things ethically, right, is to kind of challenge them and explore them and encourage a broader spectrum of people to explore them, right? So the fact that a bunch of artists have got involved in the whole NFT thing, and it's caused a lot of anger and rage within the circles I'm in. I think, and rightfully so. I think some of it is fool's gold and maybe snake oil, and you think, what's going on here? But I'm just glad that artists are involved and a part of the conversation. I think it will lead to some people, unfortunately, being hurt as part of that process. But I hope that will then lead to kind of growth and development, and for us to then go, actually, how do we do this but do it better, kind of ethically speaking? Because I think underlying it all, the technology is agnostic. It's just an efficient way to do something, right? That's
Mm.
all it is. It comes down to kind of efficiency, and it can solve potential problems, and it's just about how you apply that. And when something is so closely married up to the investment world, you naturally will get snake oil and opportunism and people wanting, because when you focus on just economic growth, you are completely addicted to this kind of model of swallowing up money, trying to kind of triple it, quadruple it, and then do it again. And so there are people who operate that way. That's all they've known, right? And so you will get those things happening over and over again. So without a broader spectrum of people challenging that and trying to do things differently, you won't get growth and and development of these technologies. So I think I'd like to see something in those things. Certainly for us, I mean, I remember when we first explored the blockchain, as Biome Collective, we were collaborating to explore contracts and how you can pay people fairly. When you have a creative project and there's a director and there's the kind of the guy getting the coffee, well, everyone's contributed. How do you measure that? So we were having very interesting conversations about how technology can possibly address those imbalances that we have in society. And so that's where my head's at when it comes to these blockchain, for example. So I've always kind of focused on the potential positive in that technology, but I'm also kind of very aware, and because I kind of have a general understanding, I could sometimes spot the kind of the salesperson maybe selling me something that's maybe not true. So I would definitely say you have to be cautious, but don't abandon it. There's something in it, you know, absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Mal. We'll look forward to you taking part in the roundtable. But I think this is a really good introduction to you and some of the issues and the experiences you've had. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Likewise. I really look forward to it, Andrew. Thank you.
Cheers. Take care.
All right. Take care. Bye bye.